Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are continuing our coverage for the 2025 fantasy football season, and today we are going to be discussing the running back position. If you missed our episode on quarterbacks, whether you're watching on video or listening on audio, make sure you go back and check out the last episode we put out, which was our breakdown of the quarterback position. We ranked them, we tiered them, and we discussed draft strategy for that position, so make sure you go check that out if you have not already. But today, we are talking about running backs, and this is our running back buy list. Every fantasy analyst has, something that they indicate whether they like or don't like a player, whether it's love, hate, like, dislike. Well, here at Mike's Money Picks, we're doing a money theme, and so we're going to be buying these running backs. These are the running backs that I really like this year. These running backs that I want to get on my roster. I'm willing to draft them ahead of ADP, and, this is certainly catered towards season-long fantasy, but if you want to extrapolate this into best ball as well, these are guys I want on my rosters at the end of the day, no matter what. These are guys that I want to be drafting, and we're going to break down the reasons why we want to be drafting, right? So before we start the list, which there is 5 of them, if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Make sure you rate and review if you're listening on audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I really do appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and kick things off with the number 1 running back on my buy list, and I think this one is it's a little obvious. It's Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is my running back 1 for the season. If you guys have been listening to my content for a while now, you know that I am a big fan of Bijan dating back to his days at Texas Hook'em. He is a generational type running back, in my opinion. He was a great prospect coming out of high school, great draft prospect at Texas, got drafted to a team in the Atlanta Falcons that it seemed like was going to be a great fit with how much they run the football. In the first year, it was not, because he played for Arthur Smith. And I'm not going to turn this into an anti-Arthur Smith podcast, even though I could. But in 2024, Arthur Smith was no longer around the Atlanta Falcons organization. And so Bijan Robinson played that season without the interference of Arthur Smith. And so in that season, Bijan Robinson was 4th in snap share at the running back position last year and 1st in weighted opportunities, meaning when you account for all of the carries and all of the targets that Bijan Robinson had, he was getting the rock. He was getting the rock a lot, and he was quite good at it. He ended the season ranked running back 3 in fantasy points per game and overall in total points for the season. But what I really like about Bijan was, if you just look at the last 12 weeks of last year, week 6 on to last season, he was the running back 1 in all fantasy football. And oh, by the way, if you're wondering if he's good at football, he is. He is ranked 1st in yards created among all running backs, meaning basically if you were to take, say, a running back runs for 4 yards and there's a linebacker that's there and meets him in the hole, right? That 4 yards could be credited as what's known as line yards, yards that the offensive line generated before the running back ran into any resistance. Well, when Bijan Robinson makes that linebacker miss and runs for a 20-yard gain, then that goes down as 16 yards created, 20 minus the 4 that the line generated. Follow? So what that means is, by Bijan Robinson being 1st in yards created among all running backs, he was making guys miss. He was making guys miss often. And so now what you have, now that Arthur Smith is no longer in Atlanta, Bijan Robinson has the perfect combination of opportunity and ability. He is not only an elite real-life running back, but he now has just exceptional amount of opportunity to be an elite fantasy running back. And oh, by the way, in case you're wondering about a timeshare or a committee, like we said, he ranked 4th in snap share last year at the position. That's quite substantial. And the offensive coordinator of the Falcons is of the Sean McVay coaching tree. Why does that matter? Sean McVay, more so than anybody in the NFL, loves to ride with one running back, does not believe in running back by committee, does not believe in giving guys a break. You can get a break when you're dead. So Bijan Robinson playing for a team that is going to give him carry after carry after carry, and a guy that is going to produce carry after carry after carry, and oh, by the way, can produce in the passing game as well. This is just the perfect combination for my running back 1 overall for the 2025 season. I have no problem drafting Bijan Robinson with the number 1 overall pick in fantasy football. In best ball, I'd like to get him at 2 or 3, but in season long, where there's not as much of a premium on the wide receiver position, yeah, you can go ahead and take Bijan number 1 overall. I have no problem with that. And if you're playing Dynasty, I believe he is the Dynasty commodity to have at the running back position. Now, not everybody on this list is going to be that obvious, right? My second guy on my list is going to be Alvin Kamara. So let's go ahead and talk about how you can predict running back success in the NFL, right? So in the NFL, more often than not, last season is a great predictor of this season. Things change a lot in the NFL, but there's so much checks and balances, so much that goes on in the NFL that a lot of times you can look at last year's results, ask yourself, how is this going to change in the coming years? And if it's not really a whole lot of negatives that you can think of, then you can anticipate that the guy's going to have a lot of success year in and year out. And to me, that is the case with Alvin Kamara. His current ADP is running back 1537 overall. That is taken from Fantasy Pros. It's a consensus of a lot of fantasy football platforms. Alvin Kamara is being drafted as the 15th running back on the board, and I can't figure out why. Last season, he was running back 4 in fantasy points per game and running back 9 overall. And in those games, he led all running backs in targets and target share and ranked second in weighted opportunities behind only Bijan Robinson. So by him being a running back that is targeted supremely in the passing game, more so than any other running back, that gives him an incredible high floor and also an incredible high ceiling because, let's be honest, it's a lot easier to catch a dump off out of the backfield and gain 1 yard and get 1.1 points in PPR than it is to run for 11 yards and get 1.1 points in PPR. So Alvin Kamara, by virtue of his usage in the passing game, is going to be just an easy target, in my opinion, and he's not being drafted like it. In fact, if you look at Alvin Kamara's entire career, he has never finished outside the top 13 in fantasy points per game, and he's being drafted right now outside the top 13 running backs. Now, I can hear your counter arguments now, but Mike, the Saints suck. Well, guess what? They were awful last year too, and that didn't stop Alvin Kamara from being running back 4 in fantasy points per game, running back 9 overall. I would argue that they actually have a better offensive coordinator this year in Kellen Moore, a guy who just came from Philly and has previously been at the Chargers and Dallas. In all these spots, he's able to use the running back in advantageous positions in the passing game. And I think that Kellen Moore, looking at what he's got on offense, looking at what he's got on quarterback, I trust him to find ways to get Alvin Kamara the football in his hands and for Alvin Kamara to rack up fantasy points. And I think that running back 15 is a bargain for Alvin Kamara. Now, here's the next part of this. Alvin Kamara is an example of people drafting like last year doesn't matter, right? Because people are thinking that he's going to regress for whatever reason, whereas I do not. So what are reasons that a running back might progress in fantasy football, right? What are reasons that a running back can take what they did last year and have a better result this coming year? Well, obviously, the first and foremost, what they could do is they could get better at football. The problem with that is it's incredibly hard to predict. It's incredibly hard to quantify, and you don't really know when it's going to happen for any given player. But the other ways that running backs can improve their fantasy output year in and year out is for the situation around them to change. And the running back position is more predicated on the situation around them than any other position, because running back in the NFL, more than any other position, is a committee or a position that is used by committee, where not running back is on the field all the time. So the easiest way that a running back can improve their fantasy output is to be on the field more. Are they going to have less competition around them? This is something that you saw last year with Chase Brown and Kyron Williams, guys that I like this year as well, who almost made this list, who were just on the field all the time. And even though the advanced metrics didn't always think that they're the 2 best running backs in the NFL, they were great fantasy assets because of the fact that they were on the field and getting touches all the time. Now, how can that play into someone's favor? Well, what can end up happening is year in and year out, obviously, players will change teams, coaches will change teams, offensive lines will change teams. So what you can have with a player is you can have the situation around them improve. So if they're not only getting more snaps, but they're going to be in a better situation, then they can improve their fantasy outputs. Are they going to have a better offensive line blocking for them? Are they going to have a better offensive coach designing plays for them? Are they going to be in a better offense and have more red zone and goal line opportunities? Well, I think pretty much all that can be true for DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. His current ADP is running back 21, 57 overall in that consensus ADP, and he's being drafted right at where he was last year. He's running back 21 in fantasy points per game last year, and he's being drafted right at this year. But yet the situation around him is exponentially better. And here's why. First and foremost, the Chicago Bears went out and invested in the offensive line. They are now a much better team. They're going to be a much better run blocking team than they were last year. Second off, DeAndre Swift now plays for Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. So when he was with the Detroit Lions, DeAndre Swift was quite good. He was running back 15 fantasy points per game in 22 and running back 8 in fantasy points per game in 2021. Both of those seasons with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. Now, if your counter argument to that is, well, Mike, wasn't he splitting snaps during that time? Wasn't he, basically a committee back during that time? Well, the answer is yes. And he was still running back 15 in fantasy points per game in 2022 and running back 8 in fantasy points per game in 2021. So the fact that he was in a committee did not really hamper his production a whole lot. And oh, by the way, the whole concept of, will a committee impact his fantasy output? Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were a committee for the Lions last year, and they accounted for 584 total fantasy points. And not only that, but they accounted for 88 catches. Here's what that means. The running back position in the Ben Johnson offense is just the place you want to be because of the way that Ben Johnson uses his running backs. Everything in Ben Johnson's offense is predicated around play action. And how are you good at play action? You run the football well. And then when you run the football well, play action has to be respected. And then one of the easiest way to get the ball to the running back is to actually have a late developing play where you play action to him and take a handoff and then put him on a route in the receiving game. That's something that they do with Jahmyr Gibbs all the time because it attracts eyes and then diverts him, and then you got to go back to him, right? So the Ben Johnson system is just so good for running back play that I just don't see how you could possibly not think that DeAndre Swift isn't going to improve from where he was at last season. I just think that he's going to see a massive step forward. And if the counter argument is, well, Mike, Ben Johnson always runs a committee. Look at Gibbs and Montgomery. Look at DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, right? Well, then why aren't we drafting the other Bears running backs, Roshan Johnson and Kyle Monangai? I think you can make an argument that the two of them should be getting drafted as well if, the counter argument is that it's going to be a committee. But if you think that it's not going to be a huge committee, then you have to think that DeAndre Swift is going to be a big-time performer here again in 2025. Now, the next back on the list. So there's going to be two more running backs that I'm going to talk about, and they're different types of draft picks. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of what I do in a draft is predicated based off of what is already on my roster. If I need a running back to fill into my starting lineup and I'm behind at the position, then what I want to target is I want to target a guy that I can just plug in and week out. Don't worry about the matchup. Don't worry about the point spread, the defense he's up against. Don't worry about any of that. Just plug him in, let him get his point total, and it'll probably be pretty good. And let's move on to next week, right? To me, the quintessential guy for that, the quintessential late-ish starting running back that you can draft is Tony Pollard. He's currently have an ADP of running back 27, and that is 71st overall consensus. And that is worse than where he finished last season. He was running back 22 in fantasy points per game last year. And this was when he was on a Tennessee Titans team that featured him quite a bit. He ranked 9th in the NFL in snap share and 9th in weighted opportunities last season, meaning that he was on the field quite a bit and he was getting the rock quite a bit. Now, everything that we talked about with DeAndre Swift can kind of apply to a smaller degree for Tony Pollard. We expect this Titans offense to be a lot better this year than they were last year, simply because they drafted Cam Ward at quarterback. They have former Bengals OC as their head coach now, also of the Sean McVay coaching tree, which also likes to favor one running back. And so you're seeing that Tony Pollard, if he's a part of an offense that's going to get more red zone looks, more goal line looks, then that simply has to lead to more fantasy points, right? A rising tide lifts all boats is the phrase for a reason. It's not a rising tide lifts some boats. And so Tony Pollard, by being a running back on an offense that's going to be better, should allow him to score more fantasy points. And if you're worried, well, as we should be about a lot of running backs, but Mike, Tyjae Spears is there. Tyjae Spears is going to be in a committee with him. Well, currently Tyjae Spears is hurt. So at the start of the season, Tony Pollard is going to be getting all of the run at running back. And last year, he was actually deceptively good behind a bad Titans offensive line and a bad Titans offense. He ranked 6th in the NFL in yards after contact per attempt, meaning he was able to really break tackles or make guys miss, I should say, and really do something with it afterwards because, he was getting tackled a lot. So I really like what Pollard was able to do last year, and I really think it continue into this year. Now, the last running back here on this list is going to be a different type of play. So when I am drafting a bench running back in fantasy football, I don't always just want a guy that's like, well, if one of my starters has a bad matchup, I can throw him in. Or if one of my starters gets hurt, I can throw him in and I can feel good about it. I want to swing for the fences with a backup running back. And what I mean by that is I don't want a guy who could just be a top 25, top 30 running back on a given week. I want a guy who can go out and win me weeks, win me matchups, and possibly in the season is like a top 10, top 15 running back. And to me, that guy later on in drafts is Zach Charbonnet. If you've ever seen the TV show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, there's a joke on there. It's like a great value brand wine called Charbonnet. That's how they say it is, Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet, he's not great value brand. He's the real deal. His current ADP is running back 39, 116th overall. But what if I told you, would you believe me, if Zach Charbonnet finished as running back 25 overall in 2024? I think you might not believe that because he has the perception of being the backup to Kenneth Walker III for the Seattle Seahawks backfield, right? And last year, Walker was hurt for 5 games. So Charbonnet got 5 starts in those games. But here's the deal. No matter who was starting for the Seattle Seahawks last year was really, really effective. If you just had a position on your team called Seahawks running back and you got either Walker when he was healthy or Charbonnet when Walker was hurt, that position, Seahawks running back, would have ranked as RB8 alone last year. If you could just play the starting running back for the Seahawks, you would have had a top 8 running back, right? So in other words, it stands to reason that if something were to happen to Kenneth Walker, then Charbonnet could instantly be RB8, right? In fact, if you even look at it further, if you just look at Charbonnet's starts last season, he averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game in PPR scoring in those 5 starts. If you extrapolated that over to a full season, he would have been running back 2 for the year last year. So all that being said, too, and right now, Kenneth Walker III is not practicing. He's not 100% healthy. So you're potentially one carry away with Kenneth Walker getting hurt, and seriously hurt, away from Zach Charbonnet not only being the starter, but being like a top 10, top 5 fantasy running back week in and week out as long as he's the starter. And oh, by the way, he's not just some chump like bench warmer when Walker's active. He's really, really good when he gets to start, but he's got to roll in the offense even when Walker's active as a goal line guy, as a red zone guy. So he's got a little bit of standalone value, but he's got a ton of what we call in the fantasy football world contingent value, where contingent on if Kenneth Walker III ain't playing, then Zach Charbonnet is going to be instantly significantly more valuable. And so Charbonnet is a guy that I want on my roster as a bench player because if something happens, you could have yourself a top 10, top 5 fantasy running back. And to me, that is the archetype of guy that I want to go after for a bench running back in fantasy football. All right, that is going to do it for the running back buy list. Those were the 5 running backs we're buying in 2025. Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, and Zach Charbonnet. All 5 right there. So that is going to do it for the running back buy list. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so that way you can check out our running back sell list, which is going to be coming out not too far from now. And if this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. Remember, we are here to help you win your fantasy leagues in the 2025 season. If you're listening on audio form, make sure you rate and review the podcast. It helps me out a ton. And oh, by the way, if you heard me talk about best ball at this top and you want to try best ball, check it out on Underdog. Use my promo code and get your first deposit matched up to $100. Link is in the description on that, or you can just type it in. That works also. And if you want access to all of my ranks and all my tools for best ball, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. But y'all, that is going to do it for the running back buy list. Like I said, make sure you're subscribed so you can be back for the sell list, as well as the wide receiver buy and sell list, and then the tight end rankings and tiers as well. But that's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. Like I said, giving out plenty of information. Hopefully, we're going to help you guys win your fantasy leagues this year. So best of luck to you guys in all your fantasy drafts. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.